So welcome to the PDC, and this morning we'll be going over Introduction to Permaculture, and then we'll be moving through all of the other modules of the Permaculture Design course. But before that, I want to try to go over, at least for me as a teacher, goals for this course. Also, that corresponds to hopefully what I would push to be your goals also, but you have to take that on yourself. But to gain a basic understanding of applied permaculture. So we're going to go through lectures are going to do theory, moving into strategies. Strategies help us to plan implementation, so that's our master planning. But it's great to have a plan, but if you can't apply it, meaning that we don't learn hands-on activities that we're going to do our practicals in the morning, then theory without practicals is really not going to help you in life. So that's why we wanted to take this and make sure we can apply it. So we want to create a master plan, integrating all of the theoretical and practical information you've learned. So at the end of the course, you'll be able to create a permaculture master plan based on an outline dictated by permaculture or a permaculture design process. It's basically a step-by-step 1, 2, 3 to get to a plan to implement some type of permaculture design somewhere in the world if you so choose. And that'll bring us into the concept of you're being what Bill Mollison described as an owner-operator, meaning that he wants to teach people to do it on their own farms. So I want to teach you to be able to make a plan for your own farm, not to hire someone. But we also can show how to be a consultant, because some people are not going to make that choice. Some people have a job. Maybe I'm a school teacher. So I don't have the time, because I enjoy my profession. I teach children. I don't want to or don't have the time to build my own farm, but I could hire a consultant to help me. So I may want to have an orchard, or I may want to have these things, or dig a pond, for instance, or water harvesting. And it may be appropriate to have a permaculture consultant in that. And also at the end of the course, you have the option to possibly become a teacher someday. So that I like to think about it as wearing many hats. So we're going to have like change sometimes where I'm speaking, hey, this is how a consultant would look at this. This is how an owner would look at it. And then, okay, this is how we're teaching it. So these are 3 different things that we'll look at. The opportunity to experiment with or implement ideas on site, which is Raktamachat. So while we're walking through the gardens or we're doing our practicals, you can say, hey, what about this? What about that? And sometimes those things are, yeah, we can implement that. That would be pretty cool. That's a great idea. Not everyone has all of the ideas. And we'll see that at the end when we see the master plans. People are doing research about permaculture. They're looking at all kinds of different things, and you always can see something different. So I always like it at the end of the course. I get to see your plans, and it helps me to do better permaculture because I see things with different relationships. So what we're going to learn in the next couple of days is how permaculture is about identifying relationships. And basically, to me, that's how I see the world. So when I first didn't know about permaculture, I had an outlook of the world based on what I had been taught, let's say conditioning. And then at a certain time, I find permaculture, which is more about nature as our teacher. So in that instance, I'm not really your teacher. I'm not going to be your teacher, and at the end of the course, not like some other things, I don't want you to refer to me as that was my teacher. My teacher, Bo, said this. My teacher, Bo, believes that. I want you to be able to say, I believe this, I can do that. It's more of your personal permaculture, not mine, so I'm more like a facilitator. I'm just going to guide you through a process. The process is established. We're going to walk through it together. At the end, you have to be able to do the process yourself. And when you can do that process, you'll be able to see nature in a different light. Basically, think about like glasses. You'll have like permaculture tinted glasses because this is how now I understand why the tree grows like that. I understand why it chooses to grow there. I understand why it fruits in this season. I understand those. And then the relationships between that tree to this tree. Why I may place elements in a certain thing is all of relationships. So we're going to see the interdependency of permaculture. So that gives us a different interpretation of nature, or nature as our teacher. I want to meet your own learning expectations and goals. So that means that the more you tell me about yourself, the more you tell me about your desired future project, if that's the case, then the more I can tailor the class to meet that learning expectation, because permaculture is a huge subject. I like to think about it like an umbrella. So if I think about permaculture, it's too big of a word. Okay? So I have to break it into smaller segments so I can get my head around it. So if I hold up my view of the world based in a permaculture view, I think about like an umbrella over me, and each of the spokes holding the umbrella up is a discipline or within permaculture. And we can see that on the tree, which we call the tree of life at Raktamachat. Typically, that's called the permaculture flower. You'll see a lot of infographics if you search permaculture flower on the internet. I chose not to use a flower. I did a tree because it's perennial, and permaculture being about perennial agriculture. And then the fruits being the, let's say, products or yields that we can derive, which are our principles that we're going to go over today, and look at how those disciplines, which are the branches. So each one of those branches helps me to categorize in a smaller way very big ideas. We want those to be balanced, so that's going to bring to the concept of holism. So permaculture 40 years ago, to be frank, not very holistic. The book doesn't get into any type of holistic concept as we may see modern permaculture today. So we're also going to have to talk about, well, we're going to start this morning's course with the history of permaculture, but we can also then lead into the present day permaculture. And we would also like to think about what is the future of permaculture. So these are things, and I would say it's becoming a lot more holistic in the way of seeing not just nature as being balanced, but we're within nature. So we have to be balanced within nature, and then within our own selves, what does it take to be balanced? Because if you can't really get your head right, it doesn't matter if you live in the nicest place in the world, or here's the best plan, you got all the trees, you have all the fruits, you have all the vegetables, you have everything you want, but you're not happy. Well, so what does it take to work on that? So that's something we want to look at. Where does this come from? Well, it's permaculture design, a PDC, permaculture design course. So design being the subject of permaculture. This is the zoom in of the designer's manual, which is called the egg or permaculture egg. Bill Mollison, in the preface to the designer's manual, recommend you would read it. Basically, he goes over and describes why he chose all the symbolism of his logo. So you can obviously see earth, wind, rain, water, things like that. He has the what he calls the serpent of life with a rainbow, okay, kind of eating its own tail. The egg, which is symbolism in when we do patterns tomorrow. We'll be looking at patterns in permaculture and how different patterns represent different things or energy. So egg is called the leading edge of growth. So there's an egg, right? Our fingers grow. It's the leading edge. So he chose that. The Raktamachat logo also is an egg based on the concepts of permaculture. So, but Bill, that book is the basis for the course, okay? It's what made the curriculum that we follow for our course. But Bill had some criticism from some of his students, and they said, you know, that's an amazing book. It's like an encyclopedia. It's encyclopedic. That means it's hard to read. So great if you're a teacher. My job is to kind of like facilitate translating the book, maybe, because it's difficult for people to read. So that's fine. We put it into an easier to digest, say, format. But Bill then wrote a second book. So he wrote the Introduction to Permaculture after Permaculture, a Designer's Manual. So the Designer's Manual, Introduction. So it may be sometimes more appropriate to actually read the Introduction to Permaculture, then read the Designer's Manual, even though they were printed out of series, okay? The Introduction to Permaculture is easy to find on the internet, or you can purchase it. And it's more like a gardening type manual, so I can, it's a lot more infographic-y. It's a lot easier to process. So this is a picture, this is how it works. So I would highly recommend reading that. We're going to also pull from that throughout the course, so we stay with the traditional curriculum. But as I said, we have history, present, future. We're going to try to play with those. So what is permaculture? Where did these words come from? Well, we have the word permanent and agriculture. So that's the two words that Bill drew on to create permanent culture. Permanent culture is quite recent. Actually, Bill was charged in Australia with plagiarism. In the designer's manual, he puts the references that he used for each chapter at the end of each chapter, not all the way at the end of the book. The first book that he referenced in the designer's manual happened to be a book that used the word permaculture in 1930. That book, if you go to it, references a book that used the word permaculture first in like 1880. So the word is not new, permanent agriculture. So Bill then said, well, you know, maybe it wasn't permanent agriculture, though that's what it was at the beginning, permanent culture. So now this is more of the holism. So that came out around 1983, I believe, that he started to use that word, permanent culture. Okay, I like to think about it this way. When I'm thinking about permaculture, people always asking me, what does it mean? What is it? Well, the best I can tell with our food systems today, we can easily see they're not really stable. They're based on too much fossil fuel input. So if it takes 10 calorific calories or energy measurement of fossil fuels to make 1 calorific calorie of, say, corn, that's not really sustainable. So the definition of sustainability, which we'll get into a lot more detail later, but energy in to energy out, 10 to 1, that's not really good. It should be like 1 to 1. 1 calorific calorie in, 1 calorific calorie out. That's what happens in our gardens typically, okay? So that's not there. So if we don't have a stable food source, we don't derive culture. So if we look historically to traditional or tribal cultures, what do we see? Well, civilization as we know it, or past civilizations that developed, they developed on the back, if you will, of stabilized food sources, meaning they derived food sustainably. And then they built a civilization around that. Meant people had free time. When people had free time to do other things, typically they described doing activities like arts and crafts. So a person, like in Thailand, for instance, traditionally, if we went back 100 years ago, a person could make all the rice that they needed for their family. They worked for 2 months a year. For 10 months of the year, they didn't have to do anything. They had provided for their family. And that was one man that worked 2 months, and the other people in the family didn't really work. So you could see the arts, crafts, the aspect of how many temple days they go to the temple to do festivals is a relationship to how much I need to work to provide for myself, and that derives arts and crafts. And today we see around the world, arts and crafts are hardly performed. Even if what we want to call modern art today is art, I'm not really sure. Throwing paint on the thing is an expression of doing nothing versus a person taking lots of time, like to make a pot or to weave something. So we're talking hours of work on something, very craftsman-like. And at the end, they didn't have a lot of value to it. They didn't value those things. They made a basket, they gave it away. The guy whittled a knife, right? And you said you liked it, he handed it to you. I can make a new one. I have free time. So I want to see that the concept that we're looking for in permaculture is how we can use permaculture techniques, practices, thought patterns to help us derive more free time in our life. When we have more free time in our lives, we can choose what to do with it. So we can, firstly, be with ourselves, find out who we are. So who are we? I have time to think about who I am. Next, I can develop relationships to people I want to be around. I have time to be with them, to know who they are. And then we can even go further to may say more of a communal aspect of family nucleuses interacting in a community. What interactions do I have within the local village? How do I support the school? How do I support the local temple? These type of interactions. And then even on a national and international level. So we will look at that. But another thing about permaculture becoming a movement, what's happening in the world. Where did it start 40 years ago-ish? Moving forward. Well, it's interesting. This is a quote from a gentleman named David Suzuki. I think he's ranked as the 5th smartest living person in the world currently. So he was quoted as saying, "What permaculturalists are doing is the most important activity that any group is doing on the planet. We don't know what details of a truly sustainable future are going to be like, but we need options. We need people experimenting in all kinds of ways, and permaculturalists are one of the critical gangs that are doing just that." So it's interesting to see that you have people like, this is one of the leading scientists in the world, and he can describe and he knows permaculture, and he's saying, yeah, I know that group, and yeah, they're really pushing the boundaries of what is sustainable. How do you grow your food with less energy, right? How do you not have chemicals? All of these things that we're going to go through the course. So I think that's quite interesting. So that brings us to that word design science. What is that? Well, guys, a lot of courses around the world, I'm going to be, we have to be frank sometimes. We have to speak out loud about things. Some courses don't really get too much into the design science anymore. It kind of we had a permaculture like a little waypoint to where it started to, frankly, deteriorate. The educational quality of the courses, the curriculums of the courses were deteriorating, and it was becoming, let's use the word hippie. A little bit too much feelings involved. But let's remember it's based in a design science, which is not really difficult. It's not science. It's just a process to allow us to not waste energy. So sometimes you might see on the internet, hey, there's my picture of my farm, and that's all they did. They didn't show anything else. That's the class. They just drew a nice, pretty picture with some colored pencils. And isn't that wonderful and isn't that great? But we want to get a little bit past that in this course. I want you to be able to describe why I put the element on the page. Just don't put an element on a page. Who cares? It's a nice picture. So then you go build it and it's all messed up, right? Because the relationships between those elements were not investigated. And the reason we investigate them through planning is to save time and energy. This is called sustainability. If I have to fix it, it's going to cost my time. That's free time, time I could be with myself or my family or friends, and energy, which is going to derive money. Then I have to work more. So I have even less time, right? So permaculture as a design science is a way of planning how to derive the most free time and the least amount of work involved. This is really simple. That's what it just basically boils down to. A simple life that affords me lots of free time, okay? And I have my basic needs met, okay? So first step, we have to get into goals. We're going to have to describe what are our goals. But goals are hard to describe sometimes. People don't like that word. It's a little bit competitive. It's a little bit, man, I got to run too fast. So I like to think about it as lifestyle. What lifestyle would I like permaculture to afford me? And let's imagine I want to be your consultant now. So I have on my consultant hat. And I want to help you with your design, but I can't help design a farm or place or project or anything for you if you're not able to tell me your lifestyle goals. What lifestyle do you want? And if you have and can describe your lifestyle, permaculture has lots of things to provide. It's a huge array of what permaculture could do, but you don't need all of that. You need like less than 1%. We need 1% of what's in the toolbox. So you guys want to graduate? You think when you graduate you'll be a permaculturalist because you graduated this class and I give you a piece of paper? No. You have to do permaculture to be a permaculturalist. And if we do permaculture, we have to have tools. So this brings back like my job. My job is to introduce to you tools. These are tools that permaculturalists use. And then you would also need to know how to use them. So when it's time and I'm at my farm, I can refer back to the box of tools and I can pick the right tool. And anybody ever hire a plumber? Plumber shows up at your house. Thanks. He says, where's the leak? You say, oh, right there under the sink. He walks over. He says, oh, that's okay, cool. Can I borrow a wrench? I'm paying you $100 an hour. You want to borrow a wrench from me? What kind of plumber are you? So what kind of permaculturalist are you if you don't have any tools? You're not a very good one. If you can develop the tool set, if you have your tool set and some of that's physical, I can use a hoe. I know how to use a shovel. I can use a saw. But some of those tools are not physical. Some of those tools are thought processes that lead to strategies and implementation, and then we use the tools. So this is what we want to try to go through. What does it take to become a permaculturalist? What does it take to leave Raktamachat with our toolkit? Then I can practice. So we're going to do that. We're going to root most of what we do in observation. There's very little that I would say in permaculture that's about metaphysical stuff. Okay, it's not a spirituality issue. Okay, the most spirituality that you can bring to it is that nature, right? We're a part of nature, and I would say Gaia theory. It would fall into that, which we'll explore later. But past that, it's not that other than nature is God, but we don't find that there's that separate thing. So we don't get into that aspect, but we can see things. I can see the tree grow, right? I can see the nutrient intake. I can understand and read whether or not this has a phosphorus deficiency. So if I add some more compost, right, it would help to alleviate that. The plant can talk to me, right? And I can look at this one and say, oh, it's really healthy. So these are different things. I can look and say, oh, it's about the flower, because I can start to observe the interactions with that plant. It's my friend. I learn about my friend. We seek relationships between, for instance, the plant and the soil, the plant and the sun, the plant and water systems. So we're going to put relationships, and we want to try to arrange the elements within our design in a relationship to reduce the energy. Some of that energy is just our personal energy from going place to place. How long does it take for me to walk from here to there or move, right, products? So if we were doing natural building, did y'all notice we were moving things all the time? We have wheelbarrows moving things. If we can tighten up those relationships, get them closer together, you move things less, you get more production, you have more free time. And we expand our awareness. We start to see the world around us in a different way. So One of the bigger things is people would leave the PDC courses and say, wow, I didn't see that. I didn't know that that's how that worked. I just didn't realize how easy it was to grow plants or how easy it was to fix soil. And now that gives you a sense of empowerment, because when you leave, you say, I can do this. So permaculture is a personal thing. It's a, I can do this. And if I do it on my personal level, and if other people do it, that will change the world. But if we don't, at an individual level, change ourselves, the world will never change. Okay, you can't expect the world to change if you won't do anything. Okay, so the world doesn't change, therefore I don't do. Well, that leads us into another thing. I did my 5 PDCs, and every teacher fear-mongered me. They started off the class not like this. This is not traditional. They started off by fear-mongering you, telling you all the bad things there were in the world and all these things that are wrong with the world and how the world is going to end. And I actually had a teacher tell me the world is going to end, like that year, 2012. I said, well, thinking to myself, why am I in this class if the world's actually going to end? It won't make any difference. I might as well just go party, right? You know? But thought more, I was like, well, I don't believe the world's going to end, actually, whether he does or not. And it didn't end. And even if there's some hiccups, I have to ask myself a question. I think I would be in the permaculture irrespective if everything on the planet was perfect. What difference would it make? Would you not do permaculture if everything was fixed? I don't see the relationship. So the relationship we want to see, or the awareness that we want to expand, is our interaction in nature. See, there's like the models where people see a pyramid. We like to do this hierarchical models in corporations, and we put ourselves on top of this hierarchy, and we can do that with nature. We see the human as standing on top of the pyramid. We're the highest predator. I like to say that's kind of ego way of looking at the world. My ego puts me on top of a pyramid. But what if we had a more ecological view? What if we use an eco view, not an ego view? Well, I would kind of see a sphere with us in the center. So we're in the center of this sphere, and all the relationships of plants and animals, we're in the center. It's more of a caretaker issue. It's more of I'm a steward, which we can see on our flower, our tree of life. I have a stewardship role. Can I own Raktamachat, guys? Is it possible? If I go to a CQ, do I take it and take Raktamachat and put it in my pocket so no one can use it? So these are type of things we want to try to break, these relationships to ownership. We want to try to break down this hierarchical way of looking at the world that we've been conditioned to see, and then try to put ourselves back into more of a ecological model, which dictates sustainability.